Hey class, it's group two. So we're going to get started with the right partisan, correct? No, left partisan. That's
That's the
Nick.
one.
So Nick, can you tell us about what you found?
Yeah, so I looked at MSNBC. Um, and so are you asking me about the political slant or
Just like what article did you find, or like article, like what were kind of the highlights of things that you saw?
hmm
Does that make
So
sense?
yeah, I just kind of looked at their main website to be honest and just went through like most of their videos. Um, in general, I found most of their stuff was kind of it wasn't like numbers, you know what I mean? Like I tried to like
Hmm.
compare it to like CDC and the WHO, and there was like no um, intersecting, I guess. It was more subjective, which is, kind of to be expected with a media outlet. And they really don't like Trump, is another thing I saw.
Interesting. So what did you determine that the political uh, slant was, and why did you determine that?
They're definitely left, pretty far on the left. I determined that two ways. To be honest, I kind of googled a chart with all the major news outlets to start off with, just to see the major ones on the left, and so MSNBC was there. And then also they just had a very very obvious hatred of our current president, who is on the right. So
Yeah. Did you feel like the facts were presented equally, or like trying to persuade you to think something about the facts?
hmm as far as the coronavirus facts go, like just coronavirus, like stuff that was going on, it honestly seemed pretty objective, like pretty equal. But again, as far as politics go, when they were trying to factor politics into the coronavirus discussion, it was pretty obvious that it wasn't equal. For example, there was this one talking about how behind the curve Trump has been the whole time, where he was like actually the third president to shut down travel. And just like I'm not honestly the biggest fan of Trump, but I also think he takes a lot more heat than he deserves, and that's kind of why.
Yeah. So you kind of talked a little bit about your thoughts. So like, how did your bias affect your reading of it? Like, were they able to convince you to think one way or another?
Um, they weren't able to, no. Because like I said earlier, like I feel like our president takes a lot more heat than he deserves usually, and so I kind of had a very critical eye whenever I saw them bashing on him. And I mean, obviously, I'm biased the opposite directions, and I tried to like look at everything objectively, but yeah.
Yeah. How long or how much did you sample your outlet?
I was looking through the videos and through the website in general for about an hour and a half, and then throughout there just comparing it to the WHO and the CDC. I also looked at Fox a little bit just for kicks and giggles to see how opposite it was.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other major things that you want to share about what you found?
um, Not anything crazy. Just in general, there honestly wasn't like a ton of data on their website, which I found kind of interesting. Like I said earlier, it was a lot more just kind of subjective, kind of things that people are seeing in their own personal lives and stuff like that.
Awesome. Okay, so now Devin, what did you find?
I actually looked at Fox News.
Okay, what kind of articles or videos did you find there?
Mostly, I looked at articles. Uh, there, to begin with, when the coronavirus was first getting pretty bad, they called it a hoax. So they were trying to play it off as just the common flu. Uh, then, when Trump decided that it was a pandemic, they obviously, because they're very right leaning, agreed with him and decided that finally it was actually a pretty bad deal.
So did you think that the facts were presented equally, or like everything was said to like make you think a certain way?
For the most part, it's kind of like how Nick found on MSNBC. Uh, the once Trump deemed it pandemic, they started with getting the facts straight as far as the virus goes. But they're definitely being very politically biased and trying to use it for their political advantage.
Interesting. So how long did you get to sample your outlet?
I probably was reading up for 45 minutes to an hour.
Sweet. And how did your own biases shape your analysis? Were they like able to convince you of anything, or did you kind of feel guarded against what they said?
I personally am a little right-leaning, but I usually try my best to guard myself from anything way out there. You know, I try to root out what's nonsense and what's real.
Yeah. So were there any specific instances, any examples that you noticed that made you feel like they were right-leaning, or any other like major observations that you want to share with us?
I don't have any specific instances pulled up at the moment, but essentially it seems like it was pretty much how Nick's source was, but in the opposite direction.
Awesome. All right. Isaac, do you want to tell us about your source?
So I decided to go with Reuters for the nonpartisan outlet, and yeah, I'd say they're actually fairly nonpartisan, which is really nice because I haven't really looked at Reuters before this because I do generally watch videos, but they're mainly article based, but they are relatively nonpartisan. Yeah.
Awesome. How did you come to that conclusion that they were nonpartisan? How did they present the facts for you?
So because I haven't looked at Reuters before, and because we needed to do like a major news organization for this assignment, I actually basically did what Nick did, and I just looked up a chart comparing where different organizations lie, and then I went and I looked at the 5 groups that were closest to the center, and Reuters was the one that was actually like not in an entirely different field. Like a lot of the other examples were like about economics or about like business or whatever. Reuters was actually relatively involved in things like politics, but they didn't really attack either side, and they just presented the facts specifically. And because they didn't attack anyone, it appears like they are nonpartisan.
Awesome. How long did you get to spend looking at that source?
So I spent about 25 minutes looking at Reuters, and then I spent probably about 30 minutes looking at sources on either side for comparison, as well as like smaller like individual journalists that I usually go to for like more nonpartisan things.
Yeah, awesome. Also, how did your own bias shape your analysis? Was there like any, like, did it like play with your bias at all since it was so like nonpartisan?
Yeah, I literally saw almost nothing that I could have put like my own bias onto. If they were quoting something, they made sure to include it in the context as well as like responses of it, and the vast majority of their content was literally just pure facts. Like for instance, they basically have on their homepage 4 of their like newest bigger articles, and then immediately under that is a breakdown of how the coronavirus has spread in the United States so far based upon actual reported cases. So it's almost pure fact with like nothing to spin. You can't spin a map, really. So
Awesome. Okay, so now that we've kind of like gone, oh wait, was there anything other, like any other major observations you noticed or anything else you'd like to share?
I mean, I kind of already mentioned it, but yeah, just how straightforward they were with just the pure factual things of like I mean, it's literally like 4 articles, then a big old map showing what exactly they're talking about. If they have like a response from the president over something, they'll have the entire response rather than like a short phrase out of it and whatnot. And so yeah, it's very, very much fact driven rather than like what the meaning of those facts are.
Super cool. Okay, so now that we kind of all heard about it, what do you guys think?
That's a good question. I think that it seems like a lot of the media, a lot of like the information we get from the media seems pretty biased from like the major sources. Like Isaac, yours was called Reuters, right?
Reuters, yeah,
Reuters.
and
I've
they're
heard
they're
of
a
it.
relatively big thing. They just don't do a lot of videos, so I've never really paid too much attention to them, but they are a relatively well established news organization,
Hmm.
though not
Okay.
nearly as big as MSNBC or Fox.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
So how was like the wording in each of the articles that y'all read? Like, for example, when I say that, like, did you guys see a lot of like emotion words, like describing ways that, like, so instead of, you know, like President Trump said, da 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 da, having things like heroically declared. I mean, that's super obvious, or like ignorantly stated, or something like that. Like, did you guys see a lot of that kind of wording?
Yeah. For example, the first video here has the quote, "Ignorance has turned deadly." The next one has a quote, "Travesty." The next one's got in quotes, "Cataclysmic." They really like those big, awe-inspiring words at MSNBC.
There's only one real example for mine where they went and they had in air quotes what's metric, because Trump had mentioned that he may actually restart the economy at the end of April based upon the metrics. And when asked what metrics they were, he basically just pointed at his head and said these metrics. And so they just used like the apostrophes around that, where even
Oh, yeah.
that's like it's because it's kind of not a real metric. It's just like based upon what he thinks at the time. So it's not even really an attack. It's just kind of like it because they're metrics, but not quite.
Yeah. What about you, Devin?
It doesn't seem like there's a ton of emotionally charged words. This article from today actually is trying to be fairly optimistic. Let's see. There's quote, "We are cautiously optimistic. We are slowing the infection rate." And they called it "This Intense Journey," and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's mostly just cautious optimism.
Yeah. So it kind of seems like I've noticed this pattern of like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a lot of like, when it comes to actually, you know, talking about the virus, like the numbers of deaths, numbers of cases, like across the board, everyone's like giving the right numbers, but maybe like giving credit to certain people for those numbers, or like that's what makes a difference between being partisan or not.
Yeah, it's like what Isaac was saying. He said like they were stating the facts, but like not, I guess, interpreting them. Is that what you said,
Yeah,
Isaac?
yeah.
Like, yeah.
No, like they have a map. If these are the number of people who have the illness, I don't believe on their map they have the number of people who have been reported to have. They do have the number of deaths. I don't believe they have the number of what's the word I'm looking for? Not sick anymore.
Oh, like recovered?
Yeah, they do not have the number of recovered on it. However, but I mean that's probably largely due to the like limitations of the graph. So they don't have it's like these deaths are caused by Trump or these recoveries are because of Trump and whatnot. They just have these are the number of cases, these are the number of people who have died from said cases.
Yeah.
There you go.
Isaac, did you find any opinion tabs or opinion pieces on that website, or was it like strictly news?
It's almost strictly news. There is likely something of that sense on here, but it's not very obvious with it. And I was also trying to look more because I was doing the nonpartisan. I was trying to stay away from opinion parts of it, anyways.
Yeah.
So it's possible that there is something on here, but it's not pushed.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think also like having an opinion section of a newspaper doesn't necessarily always, like, that's not what makes it partisan. It's whether or not they tell you, hey, this is an opinion, you know, like.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I'm sure like if there is an opinion tab on like that that site that you found, Isaac, it's like very clearly labeled like, hey, these are opinions. This isn't necessarily like what our newspaper thinks, but just that writer. But like on Nixon Devon's, I'm sure it was like they have an opinion tab, but like every news article still has opinions leased into it.
It was like an opinion tab, and then it was like this is my opinion, and this is what your opinion should be. You know what I mean? Like, this is my opinion, and it's right. Not, this is my opinion, I want you to hear it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What do you think about that, like, ethically in a newspaper or news source?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really see that big of a problem with it, just because I feel like everybody knows that it's a left-wing media source. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. I feel like there is a play. I don't know. I think if you separate the news from like those opinion tabs and very clearly like label that, I think that that's ethically, like, that's fine. Like, yeah, we want people sharing their opinions. It's not a bad thing to try to persuade people to believe what you think is good. But I think there's a problem when you can't tell the difference between, like, are you trying to like manipulate me with your words, or like, are you, like, by telling me the news in a certain way, are you trying to manipulate me? And like, I just want to know the facts. Does that make sense? Like, I think that there needs to be some form of an option on those sources of like, hey, this is just straight up what happened today, not necessarily what we think about what happened, but just what happened. So what do you think, Isaac?
I mean, I don't know. I just never really read the opinion part of anything because I mean, I don't go to a newspaper for the opinion. I go to the newspaper for the news. So I don't know. I don't even read them enough to have an opinion on it.
That's fair. What about you, Devin?
I really agree with you. I like that the news will have people that give their opinion, but I would like it to be obviously stated that it is an opinion and separate it from the factual news.
Yeah. Cool. So do we have any other major conclusions? Like, we've agreed that for the most part, they're pretty fair on giving the right numbers for like updates on COVID. We've talked about how there's like emotional language used, and that is part of what makes something partisan. Any other major conclusions that we've noticed about the three sources?
Not I.
Like maybe the attribution of the facts as well as how upfront they are with the facts.
Okay.
I think that's it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, I stopped my recording.
Group 2
Cool.
out.